Hey crew, it's Pitt, and I'm back with some more Gnosis. Today we are diving back into the works of Mr. Rudolph Steiner. This is Christianity as a Mystical Fact. We are reading aloud and discussing as we go along the various points brought to light by the text. It's not the format for everyone, but some people do find value in it, so you are more than welcome to tag along as we continue our exploration. Before we begin, however, if you are unfamiliar with me, any of my unconventional beliefs, or if at any point in time I lose you in the terminology, there will be several playlists linked in the corner above, in the box down below, along with the original source material and the link for my book, so that you can get a better understanding of who I am and why I say the things that I do. With that being said, let us dive in and continue our exploration of Christianity as a mystical fact with Chapter 4, Plato as a Mystic. The importance of the mysteries to the spiritual life of the Greeks may be realized from Plato's conception of the universe. There is only one way of understanding him thoroughly. It is to place him in the light which streams forth from the mysteries. Plato's later disciples, the Neoplatonists, credit him with a secret doctrine which he imparted only to those who were worthy and which he conveyed under the seal of secrecy. His teaching was looked upon as mysterious in the same sense as the wisdom of the mysteries, even if the seventh Platonic letter is not from his hand, as is alleged. It does not signify for our present purpose, for it does not matter whether it was he or another who gave utterance to the view expressed in this letter. This view is of the essence of Plato's philosophy. In the letter we read as follows: "This much I may say about all those who have written or may hereafter write as if they knew the aim of my work, that no credence is to be attached to their words, whether they obtain their information from me or from others, or invented it for themselves. I have written nothing on this subject, nor would anything be allowed to appear. This kind of thing cannot be expressed in words like other teachings, but needs a long study of the subject and a making oneself one with it. Then it is as though a spark leaped up and kindled a light in the soul, which thereafter is able to keep itself alight." This utterance might only indicate the writer's powerlessness to express his meaning in words, a mere personal weakness, if the idea of the mysteries were not to be found in them. The subject on which Plato had not written and would never write must be something about which all writing would be futile. It must be a feeling, a sentiment, an experience which is not gained by instantaneous communication, but by making oneself one with it, in heart and soul. The reference is to the inner education which Plato was able to give those he selected. For them, fire flashed forth from his words. For others, only thoughts. The manner of our approach to Plato's dialogues is not a matter of indifference. They will mean more or less to us according to our spiritual condition. Much more passed from Plato to his disciples than the literal meaning of his words. The place where he taught his listeners thrilled in the atmosphere of the mysteries. His words awoke overtones in higher regions which vibrated with them, but these overtones needed the atmosphere of the mysteries, or they died away without having been heard. In the center of the world of the Platonic dialogues stands the personality of Socrates. We need not here touch upon the historical aspect of that personality. I have a playlist. Ancient lore, I deal a lot with Plato and Socrates. We will be returning for some more of their works, probably after this study. Socrates is a person consecrated by his dying for truth. That is true. He died as only an initiate can die, as one to whom death is merely a moment of life, like other moments. He approaches death as he would any other event in existence. His attitude towards it was such that even his friends, the feelings usual on such an occasion were not aroused. Phaedo says this in the dialogue on the immortality of the soul. "Truly, I found myself in the strangest state of mind. I had no compassion for him, as is usual at the death of a dear friend. So happy did the man appear to me in his demeanor and speech, so steadfast and noble was his end, that I was confident that he was not going to Hades without a divine mission, and that even there it would be as well with him as it is with anyone anywhere. No tender-hearted emotion overcame me, as might have been expected at such a mournful event, nor, on the other hand, was I in a cheerful mood, as is usual during philosophical pursuits, and although our conversation was of this nature, but I found myself in a wondrous state of mind and in unwanted blending of joy and grief when I reflected that this man was about to die. The dying Socrates instructs his disciples about immortality. His personality, which had learned by experience the worthlessness of life, furnishes a kind of proof quite different from logic and arguments found on reason. I disagree wholly that there is worthlessness in life. We have discussed that before. I'm not going to hit that today. You have a purpose for being here. That's as far as I'm going to hit it today. At least, unless there is more. It seems as if it were not a man speaking, for this man was passing away, but as if it were the voice of eternal truth itself, which had taken up its abode in a perishable personality. And if you are interested in more about this particular story, it is Plato's Apology, where we go through Socrates and his choice to die. Where a mortal being is dissolving into nothing, there seems to be a breath of the air in which it is possible for eternal harmonies to resound. We hear no logical proofs of immortality. The whole discourse is designed to lead the friends where they may behold the eternal. Then they will need no proofs. Would it be necessary to prove that a rose is red to one who has one before him? Why should it be necessary to prove that spirit is eternal to one whose eyes we have opened to behold spirit? Experiences, inner events, Socrates points to them, and first of all, to the experience of wisdom itself. What does he desire who aspires after wisdom? He wishes to free himself from what the senses offer him in everyday perception. He seeks for the spirit in the sense world. Is not this a fact which may be compared with dying? For, according to Socrates, those who occupy themselves with philosophy in the right way are really striving after nothing else than to die and to be dead, without this being perceived by others. I disagree heartily with that too. Socrates was one of those victim mentalities, right? The world is suffering and therefore we are not meant to be in the world, and I do not agree with that in the slightest bit. You should not be striving to be dead. You should absolutely strive to get a grip on the eternal, right? Prayer, fasting, and meditation, those are the keys. We have a playlist to help you. That should be your focus, right? Prayer, fasting, and meditation is about getting yourself together here. Understanding the eternal, but not living for the eternal, right? Not living for after I die, not living for the reward in the next life, but instead to do the best that you can here with the situation that you have here. If this is true, it would be strange if, after having aimed at this all through life, when death itself comes, they should be indignant at that which they have so long striven after and taken pains about. To corroborate this, Socrates asked one of his friends, "Does it seem to you befitting a philosopher to take trouble about so-called fleshly pleasures such as eating and drinking, or about sexual pleasures? And do you think that such a man pays much heed to other bodily needs? To have fine clothes, shoes, and other bodily adornments, do you think he considers or scorns this more than utmost necessity demands? I do not. I do not at all believe that. Now, you should not be placing extreme value in these things, right? The clothes you wear, they're nice. It's great to have covering. They should be in good repair. They should be presentable to others. It should be clean. That doesn't mean that they have to be the highest brand, right? But they should be good, right? I have a nice, decent shirt on. This came from Walmart. It was like $5. I wear it all the time. It is a nice shirt. It is clean. It presents well. That is an important thing, right? If you want to be taken considerably, or seriously, you have to consider the fact that other people will take into account your appearance, right? So you should be paying attention to your clothes and other bodily adornments. But that doesn't mean that you should be chasing the name brands, right? You shouldn't be out here, I've got to have a Christian Dior or whatever else, all those things, right? I don't know a whole lot of them. But if you are focusing on the brand as opposed to the functionality, then yeah, you're doing it wrong. But you shouldn't be, well, you're wearing clothes that are presentable, therefore you are not philosophical, right? Or sexual pleasures. Once again, you are not meant to live a life excluding sexual pleasures. And it is extremely, extremely ironic that Socrates would be talking about this, because if you pay any attention whatsoever to the discourses in which Socrates is a part of, he was quite fond of his eating and drinking and his pleasures. And so this question is a little bit ironic, to say the least. But you are here for the experience of being here, and part of that is eating and drinking. Yes, good food. Doesn't have to be bread and water. As a matter of fact, if you're limiting yourself to bread and water, you're probably living a bit of a prideful life. I am better than you because I restrict myself to this diet. You don't believe that? Walk into a room with a vegan. See exactly how much bragging he does about being a vegan, even if you don't ask about it, right? It's the same for the carnivore diet. It is the same for anybody excluding sugar to the extreme, or anybody who is living a chaste life, or anybody who is giving away all of their things. They're very proud about that. They will absolutely let you know, I don't have any material objects, right? That is the aura that they give off, and it is wrong. It is prideful. It is the key sin, right? Pride is the worst of the sins because it is not easily identifiable all of the time. You can be living with an air of humility but still be prideful. That is something that you have to pay attention to in yourself. You shouldn't be projecting, right? I think that living an ascetic life is prideful because that is the evidence that comes from it, right? I am better than you because I am excluding these things. Life is about balance, not about exclusion. You're not supposed to throw your penis into everything that moves, but you are supposed to find the one person who wants to take your penis. That is a thing, right? You're not supposed to overindulge in food or anything along those natures, but you are meant to eat both meat and vegetables and even sugar. You are meant to have these things in balance. Balance is the key to life, not the exclusion of things. And so it does seem befitting for a philosopher to trouble about the so-called pleasures. You should be concerned whether you are partaking enough or not partaking enough, but not to the excess where that is the only thing on your mind. You should be concerned with eating and drinking. You should be concerned with sexual pleasures. You should be concerned with material attainment, just not to the exclusion, not to the excess, to the balance. Back to the text. Does it not seem to you that it should be such a man's whole preoccupation not to turn his thoughts to the body, but as much as possible away from it and towards the soul? No. Therefore, this is the first mark of the philosopher, that he, more than all other men, relieves his soul of association with the body. And again, that is extremely ironic. Coming from Socrates, you should definitely check out some of the discourses on this subject. Socrates has something more to say. An example, that aspiration after wisdom has this much in common with dying, that it turns man away from the physical. But whither does he turn? Towards the spiritual. And that is true, right? When you have the awakening, you do turn at part way away from the material. That is the balance, right? Between the material and the spiritual. You're not meant to turn completely to the spiritual. I don't care who you are. Nobody is meant to turn that entirely. Now, there are people who are meant to exclude themselves from sex. There are people who are meant to exclude themselves from worldly possessions, but they are the exception to the rule, not the rule. It is almost certainly not you that is supposed to be doing those things. It is a very few people who are called very specifically, and they know within themselves that is the right course. But for most people, 99+% of the population, that is not you. You should turn towards the spiritual, but you should not exclude the physical. But can he desire the same from spirit as from the senses? Socrates thus expresses himself on this point. But how is it with reasonable knowledge itself? Is the body a hindrance or not? Not. If we take it as a companion in our search for knowledge. Do sight and hearing procure man any truth? Yes. Or is it what the poets sing meaningless, that we see and hear nothing clearly? That is in part true, right? You see and hear nothing clearly means that there are many layers to any interpretation. right? That's one of the problems with prophecy. I can say something, and what I say is not necessarily what you hear, right? That is what this is. You see and hear nothing clearly. It is obscured through the lens by which it is presented. So if it is presented in a material way, it will be a material presentation, right? And so, in part, what the poet's saying is meaningless. You can see and hear nothing clearly, but in part, if you are on the spiritual path, you get the clarification of those things from the balance, not from the exclusion. The exclusion will lead you in the wrong direction. From the balance. Back to the text. When does the soul catch sight of truth? For when it tries to examine something with the help of the body, it is manifestly deceived by the latter. Everything of which we are cognizant by means of our bodily senses appears and disappears. And it is this appearing and disappearing which is the cause of our being deceived. But when with our reasonable intelligence we look deeper into things, the eternal element in them is revealed to us. Thus, the senses do not offer us the eternal in its true form. The moment we trust them implicitly, they deceive us. They cease to deceive us if we confront them with our thinking insight and submit what they tell us to its examination. But how could our thinking insight sit in judgment on the declarations of the senses, unless there were something living within it which transcends sense perception? Therefore, the truth or falsity in things is decided by something within us which opposes the physical body and is, consequently, not subject to its laws. First of all, it cannot be subject to the laws of growth and decay, for this something contains truth within it. Now, truth cannot have a yesterday and a today. It cannot be one thing today and another the next, the objects like objects of sense. Therefore, truth must be something eternal. And when the philosopher turns away from the perishable things of sense and towards truth, he is turning towards an eternal element that lives within him. If we immerse ourselves wholly in spirit, we shall live wholly in truth, not true, right? Once again, this is a reality. You may not believe that. Many people don't, right? We are here at the express direct will of God, in my estimation. I am quite adamant about that particular point. Now, you are here to learn lessons while you are here, and part of that is denying the physical self, right? You should not be eating to the point where you are stuffed. You should not be over-consuming sugar to the point where you get a little bit floppy, right? That is a thing that we do, but it's not something that you should do. You should be living with an eye on the spirit, which is, I should be in my best shape. I should be producing to the best of my ability. I should be taking care of those around me. All of those are spiritual things here, right now, right? If you are taking care of those around you, that is a spiritual thing. If you are focusing on nothing but my eternal rewards, however, you are doing it wrong, right? You should have an eye to, am I doing this right? Am I being the best me that I can be? Because that is why I am here, to be the best me that I can be for myself and those around me, because we live in a community, and all of this is real. This is not an illusion. This is not a prison. You are not here arbitrarily, right? God did not create you to be subservient to some entity other than him, right? And he is, well, we're not going to get into the Trinity, and I'll link the video, but you are meant to embrace your life. That does not mean to lose yourself in the worldly sins of the pleasure, right? But to embrace your life, you should be eating good things. You should live in a safe place. You should have comforts. Those are things for the experience, but it should not be your end-all, be-all of things. And so if you are living holy in spirit, you are doing things wrong. Unless you are that 0.01% of the people who are actually called for monastery life, right? Most people who live in a monastery are not called that way. They see that as a way to attain that element of forever in the afterlife. That is pride. Some people are genuinely fully invested in the betterment of others. That is living holy in the spirit. But again, that is an exceedingly small percentage of the population. It is almost certainly not you. That does not mean that you're meant to stack up $1 million and never give to charity, right? You should be fully focused on separating your attention into two equal parts. The spiritual, what should I be doing, and the material, what is actually occurring. Both of those are equally important to your experience here, and you should be focusing on the balance between the two. The things of sense around us are no longer present merely in their physical form. And he accomplishes this most perfectly, says Socrates, who approaches everything as much as possible with the spirit only, without either looking round when he is thinking or letting any other sense interrupt his reflecting, but who, making use of pure thought only, strives to grasp everything as it is in itself, separating it as much as possible from eyes and ears, in short, from the whole body, which only disturbs the soul and does not allow it to attain truth and insight when associated with the soul. Now, is not death the release and separation of the soul from the body? And is it only true philosophers who are always striving to release the soul as far as they can? This, therefore, is the philosopher's vocation, to deliver and separate the soul from the body. Therefore it would be foolish if a man, who all his life has taken measures to be as near death as possible, should, when it comes, rebel against it. In truth, the real seekers after wisdom aspire to die, and of all men, they are those who least fear death. Now, I do not fear death. I do not, however, welcome it. I am fully immersed in my experience. As bad as it is sometimes, I am fully here for the experience, to learn as much as I can and to be the best me that I possibly can, right? And so, I want to live. I want to experience more. Even if it sucks, I want to have the experience that I am here for. If you are living with the hope of dying, you are not doing that, right? You are not embracing your life by hiding away on a mountaintop somewheres and contemplating forever, until you waste away and starve to death in a cave, and people are making up legends about how you're still alive 700 years later in a state of meditation, which is a thing people do because they are stupid, right? There is no immortality on this plane. You will die, and so you should not be scared of it. You came from somewheres, you're going somewheres, and anybody that tells you that the somewheres where you're going is an eternal punishment has been brainwashed by a control system. There is the collective, which is all. We came from there, we will return to there. The soul was something prior to being here. I knew you before you were knitted in your mother's womb, and you will go somewheres after here. I know the plans I have for you. And so you should absolutely be paying attention to the spirit, but you should not be living to die. That should not be your goal, right? It is the end. Every single person on the planet will achieve that accomplishment. Every single person ever born will die. Period, the end. What you do in the meantime, that is what you are here for. Be here for that. Don't be here for the eternal, right? Keep it in mind, but that is not the end-all be-all. Back to the text. Moreover, Socrates bases all higher morality on liberation from the body. He who only follows what his body ordains is not moral. That is true, right? If you are only following the body, you are not doing what you are supposed to do. If you only follow the spiritual, however, you are also not doing what you were supposed to do. Who is valiant? Asked Socrates. He is valiant who does not obey his body, but the demands of his spirit when those demands imperil the body. And that is true. And who is temperate? Is not this he who does not let himself be carried away by desires, but who maintains an indifferent and moral demeanor with regard to them? Therefore are not those alone temperate who set least value in the body and live in the love of wisdom. Wrong. What is temperance? What is temperance? Temperance is the ability to resist temptation, but it is not the exclusion of that, right? You can be temperate in how much food you consume. You can be temperate in how much alcohol you consume, or marijuana that you consume, or any of the other things. Now, I don't recommend most of those things, but the exclusion of these things is not necessarily a spiritually enlightening path, right? There are lessons to be learned in everything, and some of those lessons come through abuse of various substances. That does not mean that you should be abusing them, but it might be part of your lessons. The person who succeeds is the person who can moderate, right? Sometimes, if you are prone to alcoholism, then you shouldn't drink. But most people are not prone to alcoholism. They can have a couple of drinks. That is temperance, right? If you're drinking the whole bottle, maybe that's not temperance. But if you're having a glass or two, even daily, that is temperance. That is deciding I am going to use this thing in the manner in which it is giving to us, right? We were given alcohol. That is something that helps us to relax. It helps us to lower inhibitions and have better conversations. It allows us to enjoy ourselves sometimes, right? But if you overtake of it, then it is a poison that will literally kill you. It will literally cause your behavior to go stupid if you are not in control of it, if you are not tempering the action. Now, with metal, you know what temperance is? Right? When you forge a knife or a sword, I happen to know a little bit about this. Whenever you finish with the forge work, right, you heat it up real good. And then you cool it, right? Various ways. There's oil, there's salt baths, there's plain water. It depends on the steel you're using. But you heat it up really hot, about 1700 degrees. And then you plunge it into this thing and you cool it, right? That makes it really brittle. It makes it really, really strong. But in order for it to be able to be functional and useful, you have to temper the metal. And that means reheating it to a certain degree. Now, that variation in degree depends upon the tool which you are using. Some of them it's about 400 degrees, some of them it's about 600 degrees. For a few, very select, it is 1,000 degrees that you are supposed to bring this metal back up to, but it is not back up to the point of burning. It is not back up to the point of even being able to rework the metal. It is simply tempering the brittleness that has come from the exclusion. And so, right, when you plunge it, you are excluding the heat in a very fast way. That knife is too brittle to be used in most circumstances. It needs to be tempered. But temperance is the middle point, right? It is between too cold and too hot. It is moderation, not exclusion. That is something that apparently people cannot wrap their minds around, and is vitally important. So, no, it is not those alone it is not those alone temperate who set least value on the body. That is wrong. Now, you should have a love of wisdom, but you should love your body too. It is your temple. Oh wait, I missed the last sentence. And so it is in the opinion of Socrates with all virtues. And see, that is wrong. The virtues and vices, the 7 facets of God. Thence, Socrates goes on to characterize intellectual cognition. What is it, after all, to cognize? Undoubtedly, we arrive at it by forming judgments. I form a judgment about some object. For instance, I say to myself, what is in front of me is a tree. How do I arrive at saying that? I can only do it if I already know what a tree is. I must remember my conception of a tree. A tree is a physical object. If I remember a tree, I therefore remember a physical object. I say of something that it is a tree, if it resembles other things which I have previously observed and which I know to be trees. Memory is the medium for this knowledge. It makes it possible for me to compare the various objects of sense, but this does not exhaust my knowledge. If I see 2 similar things, I form a judgment and say, these things are alike. Now, in reality, 2 things are never exactly alike. I can only find a likeness in certain respects. The idea of a perfect similarity, therefore, arises within me without having its correspondence in reality. And this idea helps me form a judgment, as memory helps me to a judgment and to knowledge. Just as one tree reminds me of others, so I am reminded of the idea of similarity by looking at 2 things from a certain point of view. Thoughts and memories, therefore, arise within me which are not due to physical reality. All kinds of knowledge not borrowed from sense reality are grounded on such thoughts. The whole of mathematics consists of them. He would be a bad geometrician who could only bring into mathematical relations what he can see with his eyes and touch with his hands. Thus, we have thoughts which do not originate in perishable nature, but arise out of the spirit. Yes, but it would be a poor mathematician who could not take into account the physical reality and make calculations based upon that. Right? Like, this is excluding fully half of the whole computation. If you cannot measure what this wall is, you are not a mathematician. Now, is there mathematics beyond the wall? Absolutely. But that doesn't mean that the whole sum of mathematics is contained within thought. It does not. Right? There is a physical reality upon which we have based mathematics. The thoughts, the conceptualizations came after the base reality, right? We came to conclusions because of things we saw, and then we developed mathematics due to the things we saw. Not due to the things that we thought, but due to the things that we saw, the actual reality in which we live. That is where the foundation of mathematics came from. I see this thing, let me measure it. This exclusion of the body really irks me because it is so prevalent in all of the control systems. Back to the text. And it is these that bear in them the mark of eternal truth. What mathematics teach will be eternally true, even if tomorrow the whole cosmic system should fall into ruins and an entirely new one arise. Conditions might prevail in another cosmic system to which our present mathematical truth would not be applicable, but these would be nonetheless true in themselves. It is only when the soul is alone with itself that it can bring forth these eternal truths. It is, at these times, related to the true and eternal, and not to the ephemeral and apparent. Hence, Socrates says, when the soul, returning into itself, reflects, it goes straight to what is pure and everlasting and immortal and like unto itself, and being related to this, cleaves unto it when the soul is alone and not hindered. And then the soul rests from its mistakes and is like unto itself, even as the eternal is, with whom the soul is now in touch. This state of the soul is called wisdom. Look now whether it does not follow from all that has been said that the soul is most like the divine, immortal, reasonable, unique, indissoluble, what is always the same and like unto itself, and that on the other hand, the body most resembles what is human and mortal, unreasonable, multiform, soluble, never the same nor remaining equal to itself. If therefore this be so, the soul goes to what it is like itself, to the immaterial, to the divine, immortal, reasonable. There it attains to bliss, freed from error and ignorance, and from fear and undisciplined love and all other human evils. There it lives, as the initiates say, for the remaining time, truly with God. It is not within the scope of this book to indicate all the ways in which Socrates leads his friends to the eternal. They all breathe the same spirit. They all tend to show that man finds one thing when he goes the way of transitory sense perception, and another when he goes to spirit as alone with itself. It is to this original nature of spirit that Socrates points his hearers. If they find it, they see with their own spiritual eyes that it is eternal. The dying Socrates does not prove the immortality of the soul. He simply lays bare the nature of the soul, and then it comes to light that growth and decay, birth and death, have nothing to do with the soul. That is not true. Your soul is here for the growth, right? Your soul is here for the lessons. You are here to experience life. That is quite literally why you were created. And so there is no way that the soul can have nothing to do with the body. It is not possible, or else there would be no need to attach your soul to a body. The essence of the soul lies in the true. Now that is true, right? The ideal is beyond the realized, right? The physical incorporation is the realized. The ideal is the realm of God, beyond into the infinite, right? Not even in the finite. Hegel, which we have done at least part of the science of logic, describes this quite accurately as the idealized is the essence, right? You can have a lighter, right? I use the lighter as the explanation in the science of logic. This lighter is a thing that lights fire, right? That is the whole purpose. The essence of this lighter is to light fire. The essence of this is to light fire. The essence of this is to light fire. They do it in different ways, right? Now, well, not really. This isn't the best explanation of different ways. Maybe I should have a Zippo, but this uses butane and changes the butane through chemical processes into carbon monoxide and several other objects or things. This starts fire. If I strike the wheel, fire starts. If I strike the wheel, fire starts. This one, sometimes it works, sometimes it don't. But this is a torch, and you're not really going to be able to see it in the blue anyway. But the differentiation between this and this is the individual realization of the idea, right? This is a pink lighter. It lights fires, so it is a lighter, but it is different from this lighter, which has a flag on it. This one lights fires too. It is different from this one, which is red and a torch. Lights fires in a little bit of a different way using the same fuel source, right? But the ideal part of this does not really exist, right? It lights fires. That's the ideal part. But while it does light fires, it will eventually run out of fuel and it won't light fires anymore, and then it becomes something other than a lighter, right? This is transitory. This is not permanent. But while it contains fuel, while it is full of its purpose, which is to light fires, it is a lighter. Until it becomes a useless piece of plastic, it is doing its thing. When its existence is extinguished because it can no longer light fires, then it goes into the eternal as something different. But for now, its essence is that it is a lighter. Your essence is you are a human. Your essence is you are here for an experience. Your essence is this world, right? You contain elements of the spiritual. Your soul is the individualized piece of divinity that makes the decisions in the mortal realm. You are here in the mortal realm to do mortal things. So while the soul does lie in the true, right? You are a piece of God, we'll put it that way. That is part of the eternal. That is the archetype. That is the ideal. But here, you are a human being. And the human being is supposed to be human. The essence of the soul lies in the true, and this can neither come into being nor perish. The soul has no more to do with the becoming than the straight line has to do with the crooked. The straight line has absolutely something to do with the crooked, right? That is the unit of measurement. What do you mean, Bed? Well, if you've got a curve, right? How do you measure the curve? You take a straight line here, you take a straight line across here, and then you make a formula between the two. That is straight lines determining the curve. Or you can make a whole series of small straight lines and measure those. That is also using the straight to measure the curved. So, the straight has to do with the crooked. It's just a matter of viewpoint. But death belongs to the becoming. Therefore, the soul has nothing to do with death. Okay. Must we not say of what is immortal that it admits of mortality as little as does the straight of the crooked? Starting from this point, must we not ask, adds Socrates, that if the immortal is imperishable, is it not impossible for the soul to come to an end when death arrives? For what has already been shown, it does not admit of death, nor can it die any more than 3 can be an even number. Let us review the whole development of this dialogue in which Socrates brings the hearers to behold the eternal in human personality. The hearers accept his thoughts, and they look into themselves to see if they can find in their inner experiences something which assents to his ideas. They make the objections which strike them. What has happened to the hearers when the dialogue is finished? They have found something within them which they did not possess before. They have not merely accepted an abstract truth, but they have gone through a development. something has come to life in them which was not living in them before. Is not this to be compared with an initiation? And does not this throw light on the reason for Plato setting forth his philosophy in the form of a conversation? These dialogues are nothing else than the literary form of events which took place in the sanctuaries of the mysteries. We are convinced of this from what Plato himself says in many passages. Plato wished to be, as a philosophical teacher, what the initiator into the mysteries was, as far as this was compatible with the philosophical manner of communication. It is evident how Plato feels himself in harmony with the mysteries. He only thinks he is on the right path when he is taking him where the mystic is to be led. He thus expresses himself on the subject in Timaeus, which we have covered. All those who have the right mind invoke the gods for their small or great enterprises, but we who are engaged in teaching about the universe, how far it is created and uncreated, have the special duty, if we have not quite lost our way, to call upon and implore the gods and goddesses that we may teach everything first in conformity with their spirit, and next in harmony with ourselves. That is, right, the after and the now. Right there, right? Conformity with the spirit is paying attention to the spirit in the after, and next in harmony with ourselves is paying attention to the here and now. And Plato promises those who follow his path that divinity, as a deliverer, will grant them illuminating teaching as a conclusion to their devious and wandering researches. It is especially the Timaeus, again we have covered that, which reveals to us how the Platonic cosmogony is connected with the mysteries. At the very beginning of the dialogue there is mention of an initiation. Solon is initiated by an Egyptian priest into the formation of worlds, and the way in which eternal truths are symbolically expressed in traditional myths. That is not true. That is not true. That is not what this is talking about. Right? We have done Timaeus. Solon was Socrates' uncle, who, when he was young, went to Egypt and got knowledge, but it does not tell you at any point that he was initiated into a mystery. It tells you that he got history from an Egyptian priest about the destruction of the world, not the formation of the worlds. It talks about a cyclic pattern of destruction, which has been recorded by the Egyptian priest to extend several thousand years into the past. He tells them quite plainly, this recent one where Atlantis went under the waters is just the only one that you remember. There were many more. A cycle of fire and water through which the earth is changed. That is what Solon was told in Egypt. He was not in any way told you are part of mysteries. It was not an initiation process, and you know how we can tell? Because he told people. If he had been initiated and this was mystery knowledge that was contained in the initiation, he would have been killed for spreading that information. He was not. Now, it does not tell you that he was initiated, and there is evidence that he was not because he was not killed for the information that he relayed. This information was freely given and freely expressed by both, or by Solon, then Socrates, and then Plato, all three of which are assumed to be part of the initiation process and would know that this information should be held in secrecy upon pain of death if it was true. Right? All of that is a logical procedure which you can get simply from reading Timaeus. I've got it. It's in the Ancient Lore playlist. Timaeus and Critias we read about because of Atlantis. I'm interested in that. This gave the description of that. It did not say that Solon was initiated. That is a direct lie. There have already been many and various destructions of part of the human race, says the Egyptian priest to Solon. That is true. And there will be more in the future, the most extensive by fire and water, the lesser ones through countless other causes. We are told that there is a cycle of great destruction, right? Once by fire, then by water, then by fire, then by water, then by fire, then by water, then by fire, etc. on for infinitum, right? That is what is relayed. There is mention of other lesser causes, but none of those were the world-changing ones, right? What Solon was expressly stating was that there was a cycle of global catastrophes which are measurable and trackable. If you want more information on that, besides Timaeus, which we have talked about, there is a video on my page called the 12,000 Year Disaster Cycle, which will break that down for you in some extensive detail. Not just from me, but from a couple of other sources as well. It is also related in your country that Phaethon, the son of Helios, once mounted his father's chariot, and as he did not know how to drive it, everything on the earth was burnt up, and he himself slain by lightning. This sounds like a fable, but it contains the truth of the change of the movements of the celestial bodies revolving around the earth and the annihilation of everything on the earth by such fire, and then flood. The annihilation happens periodically, roughly 6,000 years, after the lapse of certain long periods of time, roughly 6,000 years, right? The whole cycle, fire to fire, is 12,000 years. There is a half cycle between the 12,000 years, which would be 6,000 years, and that is a rough estimate where it is water, right? It goes fire, 6,000 years later it is water, 6,000 years later it is fire. The last one was water. The next one is going to be fire. Get ready. All right. This annihilation happens periodically after the lapse of certain long periods of time. This passage in the Timaeus contains a plain indication of the attitude of the initiate towards folk myths. He recognizes the truth hidden in their images. It was not hidden. It was quite plainly stated exactly what was meant. And it was not about the formation of the world. It was about the destructive cycle of the world. The drama of the formation of the world is brought before us in the Timaeus. Anyone who will follow up the traces which lead to this formation of the cosmos arrives at a dim apprehension of the primordial force from which all things proceeded. Now, it is difficult to find the creator and father of the universe, and when we have found him, it is impossible to speak about him so that all may understand. Impossible is a big word. I try here daily. The mystic knew what this impossibility means. It points to the divine drama. God is not present in what belongs merely to the senses and understanding. In those, he is only present as nature. He is under a spell in nature. Only one who awakens the divine within himself is able to approach him. Thus, he cannot at once be made comprehensible to all. But even to one who approaches him, he does not appear himself. The Timaeus says that also. The Father made the universe out of the body and soul of the world. He mixed together in harmony and perfect proportions the elements which came into being when he, pouring himself out, gave up his separate existence. Thereby, the body of the world came into being, and stretched upon it in the form of a cross is the soul of the world. It is what is divine in the world. It found the death of the cross so that the world might come into existence. Plato might therefore call nature the tomb of the divine, a grave, however, in which nothing dead lies but the eternal, to which death only gives the opportunity of bringing into expression the omnipotence of life. And man sees nature in the right light when he approaches it in order to release the crucified soul of the world. It must rise again from its death, from its spell. Where can it come to life again? Only in the soul of the initiated man. Then wisdom finds its right relation to the cosmos, the resurrection, the liberation of God. That is wisdom. In the Timaeus, the development of the world is traced from the imperfect to the perfect. An ascending process is represented imaginatively. Beings are developed. God reveals himself in their development. Evolution is the resurrection of God from the tomb. Within evolution, man appears. Plato shows that in man there is something special. It is true, the whole world is divine, and man is not more divine than other beings. That is true, you are created from the Spirit. But in other beings, God is present in a hidden way. In man, he is manifest. That is anthropomorphization. right? That is assuming that because we are, God must be like us. That is not an accurate assumption, right? It is an understandable one, but it is not an accurate one. God created you. You did not create God. Therefore, he is beyond you. You cannot comprehend God. I cannot comprehend God. I can comprehend parts of the facets of God, right? A tiny piece of, not the entirety of. Infinity is beyond comprehension, and God is infinite. Pure power beyond comprehension. God is pure power. The part that is limited to creation is the spirit, that is God from the infinite into the finite. Logos is that finite in motion. And so all things are God. Every single atom in existence is quite literally the flesh of God, right? Well, metaphorically, not quite literally. Every single atom, right? Everything that is within you, part of God. Everything that surrounds you, the air that is around you, part of God. All of the physical objects, part of God. Everything, everywhere, is an equal representation of the divine. There is no, I am better because I can express myself. That is simply not it. You don't know what the next levels are. They are closer to God than you. Back to the text. At the end of the Timaeus, we read, "And now we might assert that our study of the universe has attained its end, for after the world was provided and filled with mortal and immortal living beings, it, this one and only begotten world, has itself become a visible and embracing everything visible and an image of the Creator." There is an assumption in here. This one and only begotten world is an assumption. The infinity of space is a very large spot, right? There are many planets circulating, many suns. And it is entirely possible that there are other life forms out there. Whether they have attained space travel or multidimensional travel, that is equally possible. Yes and no. But it is almost a certainty that there is life out there outside of us, outside of this planet. This one and only begotten world is another one of those placing importance on a thing because it is important to you, right? We see this world as the most important one because it's the one we're on. But if you were born on Venus, you would see Venus as the most important world, right? It is a relative understanding of the divine. It is not a full understanding of the divine. A full understanding of the divine would let you know that there is absolutely the possibility of others out there, or else we wouldn't exist. This one and only begotten world has itself become a visible being, embracing everything visible and an image of the Creator. It has become the God perceptible to the senses and the greatest and best world, the fairest and most perfect which there could be. But this one and only begotten world would not be perfect if the image of its Creator were not found amongst the images it contains equally. This image can only be engendered in the human soul. That is an assumption. Again, that is an anthropomorphization. You don't know that if God is not actually fully engendered inside of a dog, or a cow, or a deer, or a bird, or a fish, or you don't know that. You assume that because we are human. We assume that human is the epitome. That does not mean that. Not the Father himself, but the Son, God's offspring, living in the soul, and being like unto the Father, him man can bring forth. That is true if you're talking about the Son being the Spirit, not if you're talking about the Son being any human incarnation. Philo, of whom it was said that he was the resurrected Plato, characterized as Son of God, the wisdom born out of man, which lives in the soul and contains the reason existing in the world. This cosmic reason, or logos, appears in the book in which everything in the world is recorded and delineated. Alright, so logos, we have talked about several times, but again, we hit it here, right? There's the beginning, which is God limited to the finite, which becomes the Spirit, right? At the moment that it gets limited into the Creator, it is the Spirit, Now, that moment is in stasis. Everything is created, but it is not in form, right? It is raw elements everywhere. God spoke and said, I am the light, and it is good. And then change began to happen. Light became. The various elements began to combine, and the chemical interaction creates light. And so that light, the visible symbol of change of the spirit, the logos, is everything in motion. It is all instances of heat, all instances of light, all instances of thought, all instances of change. Every single instance of any movement whatsoever, whether it be intellectual or physical, is the logos. And so it cannot be represented in any particular physical form ever. It is in all physical forms simultaneously. And so while you are a piece of the logos, you are not the logos, right? In the exact same way, everything is a piece of the logos, including this walker, including this wall. All of it is part of the logos. There is change, even if it is exceedingly slow, right? There is decay happening in this wall, even if you don't see it. That is change. We can visibly see the wall because of the change occurring within it. Back to the text. It also appears as the Son of God, following in the paths of the Father in creating forms, looking at their archetypes. Right? That is an anthropomorphization of the concept of the logos creating change in the world. The Platonizing Philo addresses this logos as Christ. As God is the first and only King of the universe, the way to him is rightly called the royal road. Consider this road to be philosophy, the road which the company of the ancient ascetics took, who turned away from the entangling fascination of pleasure, and devoted themselves to the noble and earnest cultivation of the beautiful. The law names this royal road, which we call true philosophy, God's word and spirit. So, logos and spirit. This fits what I say, right? This does not necessarily refer to logos as Christ. That is not what is said here, right? In this statement right here, the word Christ does not appear. Nothing about this intimates that there is a physical incarnation. Right now, Christ has many interpretations. Most people interpret Christ to mean the person who lived roughly 2,024 years ago, 25 years ago. That is how most people identify Christ. The other people identify Christ as the oil secreted in your brain, otherwise known as the dimethyltryptamine, by which you can have fanciful hallucinations, right? You have access to that. You can turn that switch on, and that is outlined in my book. And that can be the logos or Christ, either one. But the physical incarnation is not, right? And like I just explained, logos cannot be physically incarnated wholly into one being. It is not a possibility. But this is, right? God is the first and only King of the universe. That is the infinite God. The way to him is called the royal road. Consider it to be philosophy. You seek him through philosophy. That is true. The road which the company of ancient ascetics took, yes, kind of. They kind of got it wrong, but they kind of got it right too. The noble and earnest cultivation of the beautiful, that is an intrinsic part. We call philosophy God's word and spirit, which is word is the logos, spirit is the existence of all things. Quite literally, what I say. It is like an initiation to Philo when he enters upon his path, in order to meet the logos, who to him is the Son of God. I do not shrink from relating what has happened to me innumerable times. Often, when I wished to put my philosophical thoughts in writing in my accustomed way, and saw quite clearly what was to be set down, I nevertheless found my mind barren and rigid, so that I was obliged to desist without having accomplished anything, and seemed to be hammered with idle fancies. At the same time, I could not but marvel at the power of the reality of thought with which it rests to open and to close the womb of the human soul. Another time, however, I would begin empty and arrive without any trouble at fullness. Thoughts came flying like snowflakes or grains of corn invisibly from above, and it was as though divine power took hold of me and inspired me, so that I did not know where I was, who was with me, who I was, or what I was saying or writing. For just then the flow of ideas was given me a delightful clearness, keen insight, and lucid mastery of material, as if the inner eye was able to see everything with the greatest distinctness. This is an accurate depiction. If you are unaware, I have a tendency to think a lot about a lot of things. There are many things which I have attempted to put down which I was not allowed to, right? I tried. I formulate them and talk about them many times in different ways, right? But sometimes when you sit down to write a thing, it is just not happening, right? I've got a whole video game that I have figured out all the components to, and I cannot put the pieces together. Every time I sit down, it's like my whole body just rejects it, so I can't do it. The same thing happened with the reactions on this channel. It got to the point where I just simply could not do it. Everything in me is just like, no, right? And so I don't, right? That is listening to the inspiration that takes hold. But when I wrote my book, right, the book that I talk about so often, where I'm telling people how to do magic and heal themselves, when I wrote that, it flowed. It just came out. Now, it took me some preparation before I began. I got my thoughts in order, but when I sat down, it just flowed through me. There are several things in there I didn't even know that I knew until I wrote it down. But when I was writing, it just flowed out of me. That's what this is talking about. When the divine inspiration hits, it just goes. When I wrote the book, it just went. When I figured out the way to reformulate the MBTI, right? I completely changed that system. That was entirely divine inspiration. When I figured out the overlay for the chakras, that was entirely divine inspiration. That just, like that, it was there. Bam, I was like, oh, wow, that works, right? Divine inspiration works like this. And divine withholding works like this. If you are having trouble getting it out, you're probably not meant to get it out. Maybe not now, maybe not ever. But if you are having to fight to get it out, it's probably not what you're supposed to be doing. Back to the text. This is the description of a path to knowledge so expressed that we see that anyone taking this path is conscious of flowing in one current with the divine, when the Logos becomes alive within him. This is also expressed clearly in the words, when the Spirit, moved by love, takes its flight into the most holy, soaring joyously on divine wings, it forgets everything else and itself. It only clings to and is filled with that of which it is the satellite and servant, and to this it offers the incense of the most sacred and chaste virtue. There are only two ways for Philo. Either man follows the world of sense, that is, what observation and intellect offer, in which case he limits himself to his personality and withdraws from the cosmos, or he becomes conscious of the universal cosmic force and experiences the eternal within his personality. He who wishes to escape from God falls into his own hands, for there are two things to be considered, the universal spirit, which is God, and one's own spirit, which is also God. The latter flees and takes refuge in the universal spirit, for one who goes beyond his own spirit says that it is nothing and connects everything with God, but one who avoids God abolishes the first cause and makes himself the cause of everything which happens. The Platonic view of the universe sets out to be knowledge, which, by its very nature, is also religion. It brings knowledge into relation with the highest, to which man can attain through his feelings. Plato will only allow knowledge to hold good when feeling may be completely satisfied in it. It is then more than science. It is the substance of life. It is a higher man within man, that man of which the personality is only an image. Within man is born a being who surpasses him, a primordial, archetypal man. And this is another secret of the mysteries brought to expression in the Platonic philosophy. Hippolytus, one of the early fathers, alludes to this secret. This is the great secret of the Samothracians, who were guardians of a certain mystery cult, which cannot be expressed, and which only the initiates know, but these latter speak in detail of Adam as the primordial archetypal man. The Platonic Dialogue on Love, or Symposium, also represents an initiation. I have not yet done this one. Here, love appears as the herald of wisdom. If wisdom, the eternal word, the Logos, is the son of the eternal creator of the cosmos, love is related to the Logos as a mother. Before even a spark of the light of wisdom can flash up in the human soul, A dim impulse or desire for the divine must be present in it. Unconsciously, the divine must draw man to what afterwards, when raised into his consciousness, constitutes his supreme happiness. What Heraclitus calls the demon in man, see page 49, is connected with the idea of love. In the symposium, people of the most various ranks and views of life speak about love. The ordinary man, the politician, the scientific man, the satiric poet, Aristophanes, the tragic poet, Agathon. They each have their own view of love in keeping with their different experiences of life. The way in which they express themselves show the stage at which their demon has arrived. By love, one being is attracted to another. The multiplicity, the diversity of the things into which divine unity was poured, aspires towards unity and harmony through love. Thus, love has something divine in it, and, owing to this, each individual can only understand it as far as he participates in the divine. After these men and others at different degrees of maturity have given utterance to their ideas about love, Socrates takes up the word. He considers love from the point of view of a man in search of knowledge. For him, it is not a divinity, but is something which leads man to God. Eros, or love, is for him not divine, for a God is perfect and therefore possesses the beautiful and good, but Eros is only the desire for the beautiful and good. He thus stands between man and God. He is a demon, a mediator between the earthly and the divine. It is significant that Socrates does not claim to be given his own thoughts when speaking of love. He says he is only relaying what a woman once imparted to him as a revelation. It is though it was through mantic art that he came to his conception of love. Diotima, the priestess, awakened in Socrates the demonic force which was to lead him to the divine. She initiated him. I don't know that that is recorded, right? It may be recorded in Symposium. I haven't read that one, but I know when the other references to his demon, it says that his parents brought him and had him dedicated, but I don't think it actually listed the priestess. And maybe it is because it's in Symposium and I just haven't read that. So, this passage in the Symposium is highly suggestive. Who is the wise woman who awakened the demon in Socrates? She is more than a merely poetic mode of expression, for no wise woman on the physical plane could awaken the demon in the soul, unless the demonic force was latent in the soul itself. It is surely in Socrates' own soul that we must look also for this wise woman. But there must be a reason why that which brings the demon to life within the soul should appear as an outward being on the physical plane. The force cannot work in the same way as the forces which may be observed in the soul as belonging to and native to it. We see that it is the soul force which precedes the coming of wisdom, which Socrates represents as a wise woman. It is the mother principle which gives birth to the Son of God, wisdom, the Logos. The unconscious soul force which brings the divine into the consciousness is here represented as the feminine element. The soul, which as yet is without wisdom, is the mother of what leads to the divine. This brings us to an important conception of mysticism. The soul is recognized as the mother of the divine. Unconsciously, it leads man to the divine with the inevitableness of a natural force. This conception throws light on the view of the Greek mythology taken in the mysteries. The world of the gods is born in the soul. Man looks upon what he creates in images as his gods, but he must force his way through to another conception. He must transmute into divine images the divine force, which is active within him before the creation of those images. Behind the divine appears the mother of the divine, which is nothing else than the original force of the human soul. Thus, side by side with the gods, man represents goddesses. This entire bit, right, this whole section about the mother of wisdom and Logos being the sun and all of that, that is anthropomorphizing the concepts thereof, right? It is deifying the concepts. That doesn't necessarily ring true, right? Logos is part of the divine, but it is not its own divinity. Spirit is part of the divine, but it is not its own divinity, right? Spirit is entirely God, but it is not God in his entirety. It is the limited God of creation. And so we anthropomorphize that with well, this God had to give birth to a son, and that was wisdom, and so it needs a mother, and that's going to be like, that is anthropomorphizing a concept which does not necessarily need it, right? The logos can't exist without a mother, right? Now, there is masculine and feminine in everything, including the divine. That's why if you call God he, you're not doing it right, even though I do that all of the time. That's the common vernacular. That is what people identify with, so I say it. But God is beyond gender. Placing a gender on God is limiting God from the infinite, right? It contains both the masculine and feminine because he created both the masculine and feminine. All of this is logical progressions. And so there is no need for there to be a created mother to create the wisdom. That is anthropomorphous, and you can use that to explain the concepts, but it's not necessary. I can do it without it. Let us look at the myth of Dionysus in this light. Dionysus is the son of Zeus and a mortal mother. Simile. Zeus wrests the still immature child from its mother when she is slain by lightning and shelters it in his own side till it is ready to be born. Hera, the mother of the gods, incites the Titans against Dionysus and they tear him into pieces. But Pallas Athene rescues his heart, which is still beating, and brings it to Zeus. Out of it, he engenders his son for the second time. In this myth, we can accurately trace a process which is enacted in the depths of the human soul, interpreting it in the manner of the Egyptian priest who instructed Solon about the nature of myths. And again, he was not talking about myths. He was talking about literal history. We might say it is related that Dionysus was the son of a god and of a mortal mother, that he was torn in pieces, and afterwards born again. This sounds like a fable, but it contains the truth of the birth of the divine and its destiny in the human soul. The divine unites itself with the earthly, temporal human soul. This is because it is an intrinsic part of it. As soon as the divine, Dionysiac element stirs within the soul, it feels a violent desire for its own true spiritual form. Ordinary consciousness, which once again appears in the form of a female goddess, Hera, becomes jealous at the birth of the divine out of the higher consciousness. It arouses the lower nature of man, the Titans. The still immature divine child is torn in pieces. Thus, the divine child is present in man as intellectual science broken up. But if there be enough of the higher wisdom, Zeus, in man to be active, it nurses and cherishes the immature child, which is then born again as a second son of God, Dionysus. Thus, from science, which is the fragmentary divine force in man, is born undivided wisdom, which is the Logos, the Son of God and of a mortal mother, and of the perishable human soul, which unconsciously aspires to the divine. And again, that is a misinterpretation of Logos. As long as we see in all this merely a process in the soul and look upon it as a picture of this process, we are a long way from the spiritual reality which is enacted in it. In this spiritual reality, the soul is not merely experiencing something in itself, but it has been released from itself and is taking part in a cosmic event, which is not enacted within the soul in reality, but outside it. Platonic wisdom and Greek myths are closely linked together. So too are the myths and the wisdom of the mysteries, the created gods, or the object of popular religion. The history of their origin was the secret of the mysteries. No wonder that it was held to be dangerous to betray the mysteries, and thereby the origin of the gods of the people was betrayed. And a right understanding of that origin is salutary, and a misunderstanding is injurious. And that is going to bring us to the, what is it called, something about Plato, chapter 4. Hopefully I brought a little bit of enlightenment and not too much confusion to a somewhat difficult series of topics. I understand I have some unconventional beliefs and a tendency to step on toes when I relay those. It is not intentional, but it is not something I apologize for. I am here to divide. I am here to clarify. I have a greater understanding. You may not know that. You may not agree with that, and that is fine. Right? I'm here to tell, not here to convince, even though I reiterate. It is important to maintain the factual accuracy of things. Right? When we're talking about Timaeus, I read through that. I was quite interested in it, and I may be wrong, right? I fully accept any correction. You are welcome to leave it in the box down below. But my understanding of Timaeus is not what was enacted here, right? It was not about myths. I know that that is the popular opinion. Well, there's the flood myth, and there is a history, right? That is what was recorded. Solon told the priest told Solon, these things happened and we recorded them. There was a great flood. It destroyed Atlantis. It was a worldwide event. Many, many, many people died. There was a fire event. Many, many, many people died. There was another flood event, right? It tells him the history of what has happened on the world, not myths about what happened. That is an important distinction. Logos is not a person. Never has been, will never be. It is within you, it is within me, it is within everything around. It is the element of change. It is not a personified thing. There is no need for a mother of wisdom. Wisdom comes directly from the source who contains both masculine and feminine. These are important things. Maintaining balance in your life, not excluding the material or the spiritual, that is important to your progression, if that is what you are looking for. Not everybody is. If you're here, you probably are. All of these things are intrinsic to truth, right? I try to relay the truth as I understand it through the various things that I have learned, right? These are direct revelatory experiences. Right? When I talk about these things, it is not because I read it somewhere. It is because I experienced it, and I use the reading it to be a jumping off point to talk about the things that I learned. I'm not here just to, poo-poo upon Steiner or upon Mead or upon Blavatsky. That's not the point. The point is that they do have some truth in here, but it's obscured by anthropomorphizing it, by saying that God is a human, and he's not. That is important. You may not find it so, but I do, and that's why I do what I do. If you like what I do, let me know down below. Give me a like, a share, a follow, throw me a comment. If you agree or disagree with anything that was said, put it in the box down below. And if it remains respectful, it gets to remain up. If there is another work you would like to see me read or discuss in the manner we are doing here, drop that down below as well. And if you really like what I'm doing, maybe with that super thanks, consider joining for a membership or picking up a copy of my book. To the crew, thanks for hanging out. I appreciate every single minute that you are here with me, and I am praying for you every single day. Until next time, I love you. God loves you. You are perfect, whole, and complete, just the way that you are. And this has been Pitt's Take. Peace.